Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living. We are a weekly podcast that explores how your views on death affect the meaning of life. And with us today is a man named Steve. Steve runs a website, actually a Discord server, I should call it, called Page Chewing. I was a guest on his podcast, and he was not only fascinating, but just like a really awesome, cool dude. And I always invite people who are awesome and cool to come on the show. But I do have a lot of questions for Steve because he's a podcaster and occasional YouTuber for all things literature and content creation. And I don't know, it's pretty cool. He has like a real niche, a real internet niche. And I think that's a very cool accomplishment. And it's something that I've always been excited to ask someone about who I trust because I'm scared of the internet and I'm scared of people who are successful on the internet because I don't understand the internet. So with that said, Steve, how's it going?
Good. Well, thank you for the invite. Appreciate you taking. I know it's a lot to invite someone on and to plan it, so I appreciate you, the invitation.
Of course. And we always orient our guests to our audience with the following three questions. How old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Well, I am soon to be 45. I'm 44 right now. I'll be 45 in a few days. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've always had a warm spot in my dark soul for Generation X.
That's awesome. We're so similar. I'm 43. I'll be 44 this year. So happy early birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I like everything I love is Gen X, and I
Yeah.
might have been born in 1981, but I don't care. Like hard fist up to the millennial designation. I'll take elder millennial. I guess
Yeah.
I can accept that, but that's cool. And now I have to ask you the obligatory, probably most annoying question on earth to someone your age from Albuquerque. Breaking Bad. Any accuracy? What's it like? Yeah, all that.
Somewhat. I mean, I don't know that we have drug lords that big here, but there's a lot. It's the crime isn't great. It's pretty bad. So, but there's a little bit of accuracy. I don't know that too many science teachers are becoming drug empire kingpins, but no, it's great to watch a show. You know, you see a show take off like that. Well, it was wonderful anyway, but to see places that you know in the show, it was surreal. So, and I did actually meet Ted, the character Ted. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
getting coffee one morning on my way to work, and he walked up to me and said, "Hey, how do I get to this?" I forget what road it was, and I looked at him like, "You go down here," and because I don't want to be that guy to be like, "Oh my God, I can't." You're so I tried to play it cool, and then I kind of like, "Holy, that was good." So
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely had like I grew up in the Bay Area, and yeah, they filmed like a million movies there.
yeah,
But specifically to our age group, they filmed Mrs. Doubtfire there, and I would lie, like straight up lie to people who would come to visit and be like, "Oh yeah, I know where that house is." Like I had no idea.
yeah.
And same with Full House. I was like, "Oh yeah, the show Full House is filmed like basically in my backyard." I'm like 40 miles away. Like you have to take multiple highways and pay a toll, but it's cool. I
Actually,
was 10.
it's funny you asked about Breaking Bad. I just saw the house went on sale for 4 million.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
yeah.
So let's just like jump into the page chewing. I would love you to give a short articulate history of page chewing. Like what was the inspiration for it, and then how did you start it?
Yeah, well, I've had a forum for 25 years that's taken on different iterations. It originally started as a group of players who played Dark Age of Camelot. It's an MMO. I'm not sure. It's like digital crack MMOs. Much it's I a different side topic, but I think MMOs are very similar to social media, where you become a different person almost, and
Huh.
you kind of immerse yourself in this world. Um, but anyway, so we started with that, and then we kind of veered off a little bit. And over the years, I just decided, how can I kind of promote the website and promote the forum? I thought, well, I've been wanting to read more, so I'll get on YouTube and I'll talk about books and kind of just see what happens. So I jumped on YouTube and started talking about books, which I wasn't really a big reader for a long time, and I started getting into books and finding things I liked, and I started reaching out to people, just random people, like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about whatever, and talk about a book you love, or just have a random talk and just tell me about what you do in your channel. Tell me about what you do in your spare time. What do you like to read? I think you get to a point where if you do something that someone else does, you can relate to them and get interesting questions out of them, get interesting answers out of them. So that's kind of what I try to do, and also to promote other people. And it really paid off in the long term because I made so many great friends that just kind of, I didn't care how big your channel was. I just wanted to talk. Like, let's just, if I thought I could talk to you, I don't care about your platform. I just want to talk. And before I knew it, we had, for some reason, different people coming by and joining our little club. And we started reading books together. I mean, books that go on for, we spent groupers that go on for over a year, meeting every week. I've had people who don't have a podcast or YouTube channel just say, "Hey, I want to join," and they come on and they join just because they want to have the experience and want to talk to people while they read. And it's kind of just really grown from there. Over the years, I've started focusing more on podcasting and less on YouTube. I think the YouTube algorithm was really getting in my head, and trying to make content that pleased the algorithm, and tried to make content that got, it became a like a wheel that you tried to run on, like a,
Mhm.
and I just thought I'm more of a fan of the long form content, so I'm going to focus on audio. It's less work, which is a plus, and I'll just try to kind of create long form content, which is what I did on YouTube anyway. And YouTube started going more towards shorts and kind of the TikTok kind of style of video, and that's really not what I like to do. How can anyone talk about a book or even a short story or a poem in 60 seconds? I don't know how anyone can do that. So it's not really my thing. So yeah, I just kind of focus more on the podcast now, and just, it's, I've been really lucky to have so many great people that join, and we have tons of reads all the time. They're reading books together and discussing books and movies, and now we're talking. We have a separate podcast for movies now that we just get on and talk, and no one's really concerned about how many listeners we have. Of course, it's nice that someone listens. Otherwise, what's the point? But if one person listens, then I'm happy, and I'm not too concerned with the numbers. I just want to do things that are fun with people I like, and hopefully somebody connects to it.
That's so cool, and it's such a breath of fresh air. And I've been in this industry, which I refer to as the entertainment industry, like my whole life. But in it doesn't mean into it. And I think you'll understand what I mean by that. And it's basically every reason you just gave. I've never wanted to care about metrics. I've never wanted to care about the presentation, the facade, the like image, my brand, and all that. And I haven't. And I get told repeatedly that that's why I am where I am, which is not like a billionaire and like whatever. But I'm happy, and I can tell
Yeah.
you're happy. And that was like the mutual kind of understanding on my end, at least when I was on your podcast, was, oh my gosh, here's a person who's doing what I do, but like, I mean, I say this with all respect in the world, but is more successful and has like a larger platform. Not how do I get what he has, but like, oh, what I'm doing will work. Like, it was like that simple. It was just like, oh, okay. So I just started doing video podcasts instead of audio because I do care about like who can listen.
Right.
And I was told repeatedly, like, people like to watch video podcasts. Personally, I will never watch a video podcast ever. I will always listen to them. I just don't care. It's like not. And I was a film major as well as I'm an
Oh,
author,
wow.
so I make films and I love literature and I love movies, and I don't care if people watch one or read more than the other. What I do care about, though, and this I promise is leading to a question,
No, you're
is
fine.
uh, what I do care about is that people still want to like spend more than what you said, 60 seconds on like something that like I don't agree that like everything's okay with this like TikTok movement. I actually like strongly disagree. It's not about attention span. It's not about like you should know how to be bored in a car. I'm not like, I am an old man. I'm 43, but I'm not like a bitter old man. I just actually think that long form, what we call long form, isn't even long form. First of all,
Yeah.
it's just like normal. But there's something to that. So I am curious, like what if any of like the what is has there been a downside to you not staying on YouTube's plan and doing more like algorithms and stuff? Like, have you noticed something, and what is that feeling like if you have?
I have noticed that there's a difference. I think when people see you, they have a different kind of connection to you when they can see kind of how you present yourself, or kind of, I feel like you have a different kind of connection than listening to someone's voice. So in that sense, I think there's less kind of a connection there. And I think with YouTube, it provides you a place to get comments and to interact with people. And on a podcast, you don't really have any of that. You just kind of send it out into the ether and hope that someone's listening. And you get numbers back, but it's not really the same. So there is a little bit of a disconnect there with not having video. I think it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more impersonal, but I don't know if it's necessarily in a bad way. But I think with the, like you said, with the internet being scary, I think, you see like deep fakes and things like that now, people getting deep faked, just random people. It's a strange time to live in, but I think to your point about TikTok and kind of the short form content, I do think it, it's for me, it's sad when someone writes a book, and you know a whole lot more about writing books than I do because I can't write, but um, when someone spends so much time writing a book and the sentences and the words and I mean everything that goes into it, and then somebody reads it and then explains it in 60 seconds, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked that people still read. It's such a weird relationship that I have to writing and reading because I love reading and I love writing, but I'll be honest, I used to read 30 to 60 books a year, and every subsequent year since I got an iPhone specifically, I have like read less. I still read a ton. Like I read a lot of Substacks and things like that,
Mhm.
but even that is like a little annoying to me because I'm like, some of this, not all Substack, some of it's long form, but some of it is just basically like TikTok for readers. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm in a line and I don't have a lot of time. Instead of picking up my Kindle app and like getting into this great novel that I'm in, I'm just going to read a nonfiction essay because I can stop halfway through. I don't have to remember who the characters are. Um, and actually, speaking of being scared of the internet, uh, so believe it or not, I have been a longtime internet user. I believe I had a dial-up connection in 1991. I used to use like Macintosh and make like HyperCard and stuff. So I'm not like a Luddite. But like I was using internet relay chat, and I remember being like a little kid and like talking to adults and being sort of like weirded out and scared by that, but also
Yeah.
they were always nice to me. No one was like creepy or weird or mean to me like in any
Yeah.
part of my evolution with the internet, including MySpace and all these things. I've actually never been like officially trolled. I've never had like a really egregiously mean comment on my YouTube stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but I fear it, and I don't. I'm sure I could psychoanalyze my fear, but I'm actually more curious. I am going to assume you've had it. I'm going to assume that
Oh
you
yeah.
have been like not only trolled, but like, do you give the same advice that like Joe Rogan, the elite people give, which is like just don't read anything, or do you still read stuff? Like, how can you walk us through that?
For me, I guess it's nice to be able to say don't read anything because I think feedback's important, and even in some of the even the mean comments, you can pick something out to kind of have constructive criticism. Even if someone's calling you an idiot, it's like, okay, well, yeah, like okay, but some of it's just really mean spirited and just kind of out to just to troll you. So I try to read everything when we get messages or we get comments. I'll try to read them and reply to them when I can because that's another way to connect with your audience too, is to have that back and forth. And if you have someone recommends a book to you, say, hey, I'll give it, I'll check it out, or I'll add it to my list, or whatever. For someone listening, I think that's a way for you to connect with them and say, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I'll take 15 seconds to reply to your comment and just say hello. But it must be nice to not listen to anything. But I do think that it's not always great to respond. I think sometimes if it's just out to kind of get under your skin, just delete it and move on. Because if you start, feeding the trolls, then it'll this back and forth, and nobody wins. Like there's no winning. That's what they want. They want to draw you in, bring you down to their level, and then they'll beat you with their experience. So trying to stay away from that kind of stuff.
And I have like a meta society question, but it's going to sound political, but it's not because I avoid politics for many reasons, not only on this podcast but in real life. But I do remember in the 2016 election in America, they were talking about how is it possible that some of these people voted differently just to see what would happen, and they didn't know the word troll back then, and everyone our age was like, yeah, it's called trolls, and like I, I am curious if you think that since 2016, there have become more trolls, or do you think trolls are just better at their job? Like, and do you think trolling is an official social problem, or do you think it's just whatever?
I think trolling has gone through a few different levels, and I think the trolling of even 5, 10 years ago was kind of if you bring trolling from 2005 into today, you get laughed out of the room like no one's going to pay attention to you. You have to have you have to be clever. You have to have something really really clever to say. You have to have kind of a sharp tongue and know what to say because we've all heard so many things. We've all seen so many things, whether it's directed at us or the people that. to get our attention, you have to say something that's going to like, oh, that hurts. Like, that was pretty good. So I think it has gotten up, and I think trolls, high level trolls, are rare. I think the low level trolls just, they're kind of a joke. Like, no one really pays attention to them. No one really takes them seriously. But I think trolling has gone to a different level where, and in saying that, I think a lot of people try to go about it's kind of like with TikTok videos, like you start getting their attention and then you have to do more and more outrageous things to keep their attention. So trolling just gets to, now we're looking at doxing and creating deep fakes of someone. So it's getting into an area where it's, kind of a little scary. When you start doxing people, that's a whole nother world.
Yeah, and it's weird. My friend who is really into the internet and really like intelligent and like a very good resource for me to go to when I have like internet related questions. He's concerned with like what's going on, but also he has warned me that the worst thing ever would be to require like a social security number to get
Yeah.
online. And like, can you explain that? Like, why? Because you just immediately agreed. Like
Yeah.
to people like me, I'm like, come on, like my name's Mike Oppenheim. You can see it on the screen right now. I'm like, I'm free doxed. Like, what do I care? You know?
Yeah. So I think it's what's funny about the internet, something like the internet, which gives us so many opportunities to learn about anything we want to do or go any place we want to go or communicate with anyone we want to communicate with. But when we start entering our personal information or real names even to use certain platforms, then it becomes a mechanism of control. So then it's becoming, okay, well, this person is frowned upon because of what they said about the election a few months ago. So let's shadow ban them, let's throttle them, let's put their content down in the algorithm. Let's make their life miserable, because if you use these platforms and you have your personal information tied to it, you can never get away from it. So now, if you wanted to, something happened that you wanted to get away and like reinvent yourself to the internet, you can. You can disappear for a while, come back and do a sports podcast or whatever it is. You can reinvent yourself. You can come back and do something different. But if you've fallen into the wrong crowds, you end up with the target of someone who's trying to dox you or trying to make your life miserable or cancel you. There's really no coming back from it. If you're tied to your personal information and your real name, you can never ever get away from it. And then once they know your name, then they can find out where you work and they can harass your family members and find out where you live and knock on your front door. And it's but on the other hand is how much, how loose do we want to play with the rules? There's this delicate balance there of anonymity is good, but how how much do we need to give up to be able to use these platforms as technologies? That's the delicate balance. The anarchist in me says just no rules, just let everyone do what they want to do within reason, of course. I mean, I'm talking legal stuff,
No,
but
no, I understand. Yeah.
yeah, but I like the idea of being able to just reinvent yourself and come back and do something different and just start over again. And if you make a mistake or whatever, you can come back and do something different, and you have another chance to be creative, because it's the internet is one of our main outlets of being creative now. I mean, whether you're writing a book or you're creating video content or podcasts or whatever it is, we all kind of promote it through the internet. That's kind of how unless you're going to like a local bookstore or somewhere that you're setting a little stand, but we all, it's it's a necessity in today's world. You have to know how to use it if you're going to do anything, almost anything, but especially anything creative, because without it, you're stuck. So if you're tied to your personal information, then your whole life is your. It's kind of like back in the days of COVID when they had the COVID passports, and if you didn't have your papers, then you couldn't go to live shows. You couldn't go. So it's kind of like that, but on a much bigger scale, and of course for a different reason. But so yeah, it's a little scary. How do you balance the privacy versus the anonymity of it's I don't have the answers, but it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, and kind of related to that, when Elon Musk was looking into and then eventually bought Twitter, or now X, while I am not a fan of him and while I'm not a fan of X or Twitter before him or after, I did think it was probably net beneficial for someone who is not allied on the same side of the aisle to own every single major
Hmm.
social networking thing. So I see you nodding. that's kind of my question, is just, do you think it's overall good, even though there's obviously like huge issues with both that and Blue Sky and all these other sites?
Yeah, I think there has to be a yin and a yang. There has to be a good and a bad. Whether it's whatever side you're on, you need a balance, because if everything's leaning one way, then that's dangerous. They can all work together to make someone's life miserable, or a group of people life miserable. They can deplatform people. They can do that kind of thing. But then if you have a mix, then at least you can choose your side. If you want the X platform, you can use that. If you want like Facebook or Blue Sky or whatever, you can have that. I think everyone has a place to go, which is nice, but it's also bad, because then we end up in an echo chamber and we don't hear different opinions, and we just have this feedback loop to where we hear the same thing over and over again, and we kind of lose that open mindedness and that sense of community. But it just becomes a sense of community with people you agree with. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, no, that was a good answer. I like the way you answer questions, because I can tell you're contemplative and thinking, and I'm not a kind of person who wants like a definitive answer when I ask something. I just want to hear your thought process and get to know.
Mm.
And also, it's because you're comfortable and successful on something that I am not comfortable. And I could call myself successful, but that's not here or there. My overall point is just that exploring how your mind works with these things helps me understand something, because in my opinion, and I know I'm right, you're a good guy, and good guys being good on the internet is a good, because they're obviously, if it was all, we just talked about balance. With that said, this is a metaphysical podcast. We get into like the afterlife and issues like that. So I am curious, before I get into a couple questions along that line, what is your answer to our only actual planned question? What do you think is going to happen to you when you die? Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
I thought I've been thinking about this since we talked, because I knew this question was coming. And I've always imagined it being kind of, you float out and you kind of just drift around the universe, and just kind of and you kind of have doorways you can kind of explore, and all different worlds, and because we can't be alone, right? We can't be the only things. So I think that we have to be in some kind of system to where our energy is kind of floating around, and it participates in some kind of bigger system that involves everything, and whether it's multiple universes or whatever crazy scientific theories are out there. I just think that we become part of a bigger system, and it's not so much of an individual. It's more of just, you're an individual, but you're also part of a bigger. There's a point. There's a reason for all of this, and I guess that's kind of what we all hope for, right? Is life. There's a reason for it, because a lot of people think, well, why? Why do we bother? Why do we get up every day? Why do we do this? Why are we here? It's so I would like to think that we discover that we're part of a bigger system, of something that involves lots of different species and worlds and universes and all the craziest things you can imagine. So I'm hoping. Um, I've always wondered about reincarnation, though, and that sounds a little scarier than floating around the universe and participating in some cosmic dance. But yeah, so that's kind of what I imagine, just kind of being free, floating, being at peace in some way, but also, you know, being in whether it's creating new worlds or creating new universes or whatever it may be, new realities. I think there's some kind of system that we're involved in, that we just kind of go round and round and round, and hopefully enjoy the ride.
It's interesting. It not only does it feel that way to me, but most of my dreams are what you just related, and I don't normally talk about this, especially on a not behind paywall episode. But gosh, how long? It was probably 10 years ago. I went to Ecuador and I did ayahuasca,
Mm,
and I had been wanting to do it for 5 years, and all of my experiences on it were exactly what you described. I was able to like float around. I was able to like see the spines of people I know, and based on the color of the spine, I could tell if they were like happy or not happy with their
mm,
life. And I wrote down, because I had a notepad with me, and then I sent feeler emails out to all the people who had either like really worried spines, like spines that weren't doing well, and then
mm.
various other ones. Every single person I wrote to said, I don't know how you knew to like write me about this, but this is like definitely accurate. One of them even said, my wife actually threatened to file for divorce if I didn't deal with this recently. I don't know why you randomly emailed me for the first time in 7 years, but holy crap. So I am not,
Hmm.
I'm very reluctant to talk about ayahuasca on podcasts for a million reasons, but one of them is that I don't do drugs like for fun, and it wasn't
Yeah.
like a experience that I plan on repeating, and I'm not into like this overarching movement of like shrooms and just like people like, oh, I need to do my life work, I'm going to go to a retreat and just keep taking drugs. Like the life work is when you come back, like that's the
Yeah.
so I don't mind profound experiences. I have no issue with people exploring drugs, but I am saying this specifically just in case my children or anyone ever watches this. I do think there's like an actual problem with the like actually one of our guests was he's sober and he lives in California, and he said, I nothing I hate more than when I go to a party and I tell someone I'm sober and they're smoking a joint and they're like, me too. And, it's just it's like just so true. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's still a drug at the end of the day. A plant
Yeah.
medicine, no, I mean, come on. But anyway,
Yeah. That's
so
fine.
with all that said, I was saying that to really relate that I feel like there's a real deep truth to what you just said. And then I am curious to bring that back to this idea that like all of us are in a board game called Earth, but we don't know the rules and we don't know anything. We don't even understand like what happened before we started on the squares. So do you believe that they're within, and again, do you believe is just, like in this, when you go to sleep at night, do you fall asleep hoping that there is morality to all this? Like specifically with trolls, because I want to keep a theme going. Like, do you think those people are going to hell, or do you think like they're helping us learn lessons? Like, how do you view all
Oh,
that?
yeah. I don't know if someone being a troll is worth that kind of punishment. I think maybe some of them, but no. I think I like what you said about it being a lesson. I think we all teach each other things, and people make mistakes. I mean, people do things that they regret, and people act out and do dumb things. So I don't know that it's. I think it's all part of the journey for everyone to do dumb things, and you learn from it. And in years from now, the people who are the most awful trolls today will probably look back and say, that was really stupid of me to do. Like that was an asshole thing to do. So I do think that's part of everyone's kind of journey, and that, not that it's nice to be on the receiving end of it, but I think sometimes it's a learning experience for everyone involved. But I wish there weren't any trolls, of course. But this people are mean and awful sometimes, so it comes with the territory. And I think that's something that just being on the internet in general, is you open yourself up to that kind of scrutiny. There was a woman I found on YouTube. She got promoted to me for some reason. About how she's like down in her luck and she's working and her husband doesn't work and she lives with her mother-in-law, and just like kind of all these excuses why she's really struggling. And then people come out and said, well, your husband's lazy and your mother-in-law works and you don't work enough, and just like all this, of course, off of a 5-minute video they know all the answers to her life. And then she came back and said, well, I'm being judged. And it's like, well, yeah, like that's just part of the thing where you put yourself out there. You're going to have the negative feedback. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking about like should I read the feedback or not? Because
Yeah.
I'm putting myself out there, so I'm okay with someone writing like the meanest, most heinous things ever.
Yeah.
Obviously, the things I care the most about are my wife and my children and my
Right.
parents and anyone like that. But also, I do agree with what you said. I think there's like a fairness to it all, and yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I did want to ask you a question. I have like probably two more, but this one's like weird. You use the term, so that's why I'm going to bring it up. Shadow banning has always been something that has like boggled my mind because
Mhm.
it's like remember in the Iraq War in like 2004 when Dick Cheney said it's the unknown unknowns that we can't know. Like it was like this. That's kind of how I feel about shadow banning. Like so, what? I'm sure it exists and I'm sure it does happen, but do you think it's like really a problem, or do you think it's kind of like an excuse people who just aren't doing a great job say for why things aren't getting promoted?
Well, first of all, I think it happens to everyone. I think it happens to people on both sides. I don't think it's exclusive to one side of the aisle, or one side, or any particular political kind of viewpoint. I think it happens to different people, just depending on what they do and what they say. But I do think that people are dropped in the algorithm, and people are kind of demoted. And there's been people who have gone through, have like whistleblowers at YouTube and come back and say, yes, we do this. And they've actually provided screenshots of kind of like what they've done to do it, like how they drop them in the algorithm, they promote them to less people. Sometimes if you're subscribed to them, you won't see their content pop up.
Yeah.
It's a really weird thing. So yeah, I do think it's an issue, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, so if you're creating content on YouTube and they don't like this content, do they have a right to say, I don't want as many people to see this as something about knitting or whatever it may be. So is that their right to say that? Can they do that on their own? Is it unethical if you're depending on it for if you're monetized, if you're depending on it for your income? Is it unethical to demote someone to quote unquote shadow ban someone for what they say? I don't know. I mean, it's their platform at the end of the day, and tomorrow YouTube can hit the delete button and all that's gone, or any platform, Facebook,
Mhm.
whatever it may be, Instagram, all the meta platforms. So it's if you're committing yourself to these platforms, you're taking that risk because we've all seen platforms disappear before. I mean, TikTok may be gone by the time this podcast is live, may be banned. MySpace came and went, and at the time in 2004, if someone told you or whatever year it was, and back then, if someone said, in 15 years, MySpace won't even exist, you thought they were crazy, So they seem larger than life, and then they disappear. So these platforms, they come and go. It's rise and fall of empires are all gonna come and go, and it doesn't seem like it, but they will in time.
No, I think that's really wise. And I remember like when watching Sears and Roebuck become Sears and then watching Sears close, like that's something in my lifetime I never thought I would see ever.
Yeah,
And now it's like I would have to explain Sears to someone. They'd be like,
yeah,
what? Like, yeah, so Amazon is the new Sears, and even that will probably someday succumb to some other force. That was a really interesting answer. And you kind of made me think about like a whole another slew of topics, but I'm going to stay focused because we're running out of time. Um, I was always wondering if the internet would ever, or sorry, if the entertainment industry would ever figure out a way to make something go viral. And I believe I've never seen it, but I do believe I saw the first real attempt, which was the Hawk Tuah girl.
oh
So I want you to talk about that. But before I can let you do that, I know my audience is like definitely there's a lot of people who have no idea who she is. So just really briefly for my audience, there was some TV show they were interviewing drunk people. There was a girl who was drunk and she said a quote with the words Hawk Tuah in it. I'm not even going to get into what it means or what it's about because it's ridiculous. But the point is, they didn't know who she was. No one could find her. 3 days later, I think William Morris Talent Agency found her, signed her to a contract, gave her a podcast, threw her on the podcast circuit, the same one Donald Trump was using and all these other like bigwigs. And it almost worked because she was
yeah.
actually like still here. And then thanks to a crypto fiasco, she disappeared and the podcast is off. And I believe she's gone now, not dead. Please don't
Yeah.
misunderstand the audience. But so I'd love you to just speak on that and specifically my point of it, which is, do you think they're ever going to be able to fake a virality? These companies, Hollywood, anyone.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely think they could. They can do a lot of different things, and especially with bigger names. But I think the Hawk Tuah girl, on one hand, of course, if the whole thing's ridiculous, right? But if other people are going to if other people will be making money on her saying something stupid, might as well be her make some money. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like I kind of thought, well, yes, it's silly. It's all kind of ridiculous, but make your money, like take advantage of the moment. And she actually had I was surprised because, like you mentioned, she had the Talk to a podcast, and she had like pretty big names on. And
Yeah.
then this whole crypto thing totally derailed her. So on one hand, it's a little sad, but on the other hand, it's like you kind of saw. I mean, you knew it wouldn't last forever, but I'm surprised that she made it. She kind of drug it out as far as she could, but yeah, I definitely think that, viral, you can make something go viral and you can kind of make something become a meme and just don't get involved in crypto. It's the
Yeah.
problem.
That's cool. I appreciate your take, just because, yeah, I was fascinated by it from like the beginning to the end, and especially she just seems like a nice person. So it's
Yeah.
like good for you. Like you grew up in, according to what I've read, poverty. This is like your big chance, and I'm sure she tucked away enough money, and also she can come back on. I'm sure they'll have like a VH1 where they now special in 10 years, and she'll be that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I find it interesting because I do see like a little bit of a similarity. The Cash Me Outside girl is like a 10 millionaire and owns like fantastic properties in Miami and stuff. So there is kind of like there is something fun and cool about the internet rewarding just like crazy random people. And that's why I asked about virality is
Yeah.
I do like that is the one thing about the internet that I will always support is just this like you just put yourself out there for whatever random reason and you might get like a million views and then if you like really have like electricity or charisma or something it could be like the life changing. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Catch Me Outside girl or whatever, you have to have some kind of business savvy to capitalize on that. The people who don't, they come and go and then they become what they were before, whatever it may be. But to capitalize on it, to kind of build your own little, your own little empire. I mean, that's the world we live in. So you can't really blame them for taking advantage of it. Good for you.
That's awesome. Steve, I could talk to you seriously for hours about like all this and just life and stuff. I have other questions I was planning to ask, but I always give my guests the very last question, if you will. So you have the floor. Is there anything you'd like to say to my audience? Anything you want.
No, I really appreciate being. I don't get invited to many podcasts, so I appreciate the invitation and your patience. And we had a little bit of a mix up on the first time we scheduled it. So, but no, when I had you on, we kind of just talked, and it was just a great time. So I really appreciate you bringing me on and taking some time to chat about nonsense with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast. And I also I really do mean it. I appreciate people like you. I'm a little more endeared because I'm an author, and I like people promoting like reading actual books and stuff. So, yeah, is it okay to put in the notes a link to your Discord and everything, or is that not something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. Just put the link to our website, and all the links are there for all the different articles and our forum and everything. So. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. I was hoping that you would let me. So,
Of
yes,
course.
everyone, please, in the notes section, check out the link and check out his server. It's not asking you to buy anything or pay any money, so it's a harmless click, and I definitely endorse it. Thank you again, Steve. You're awesome, and thank you to my audience for listening and some of you watching. And if this is not shadow banned, you're hearing my voice say, "This is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to another episode of Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon."